Welcome to Hospitality Talks. My name is Sam-Erik Ruttmann. Next to me is my co-host Abid. How are you, Abid?
Very good, Sam. And what's keeping you busy these days?
Well, you keep me busy with all these nice episodes and nice panel discussions that we have. So that is mainly what I've been enjoying doing. And I think today, we have a very cool show. Interesting stuff. I'm so curious about learning about Delos. I looked at what Delos means, and that's that island where the mythical goddess Apollo was born and all the inhabitants lived forever. And we have a lot of innovators here joining us, like Yasmine, who has done some great innovation things, and then Laura, who has done energy conservation. So a lot of these are about problem solving that makes our life better for as long as we can. So Abid, let's introduce our panel and get this discussion going.
Fantastic, Sam. Thank you so much. I think we had a fabulous episode at the beginning of the week. So this is the second conversation on sustainability, a topic that is extremely important and really apropos for the environment that we're in these days. Not only that these are good practices to save the planet, they are good business principles and they really do work. They are, from business modeling point of view, they save money, they are contributing more to the profit, but more importantly, they save the communities that we operate in. So as you said, we have a great panel. So without any further ado, I'm going to bring in our first speaker, Peter Scialla, who is President and Chief Operating Officer of Delos. Peter, welcome to Hospitality Talks.
Thank you very much, and it's great to be with everybody.
Well, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to join us, Peter. I know you guys have taken a slightly different angle relative to sustainability, and you're dealing with wellness and wellness certification of the building. Now, we've all talked about wellness as far as it concerns human beings. It's a different angle for the building. So help us understand, what really does that mean?
Excellent. Well, so the principles that inspired the formation of our company and our efforts were really that the notion of sustainability has two components. Environmental sustainability, the health of our planet, and of course, human and biological sustainability, focused on the health of our people. We recognize that there is so much great work going on that focuses on the effect that buildings and indoor spaces have on energy consumption, carbon footprint, and the health of the environment. We asked ourselves the following question in 2012. We said, well, that's wonderful, and to complement that, we should also be focusing on the effect that indoor environments have on people's human health and well-being, productivity, performance, sleeping patterns, susceptibility to long-term chronic disease, and so on and so forth. And so we set out to do a lot of research examining the correlations between everything that can be measured on the human body and everything that can be measured indoors. How does particulates in the air affect our cognition and our respiratory health? How does lighting affect our sleeping patterns and our productivity? How do acoustic sound levels indoors affect the body's stress indicators? And so on and so forth. And so through that process, we developed a standard called the Well Building Standard through our subsidiary, the International Well Building Institute, that has run in parallel to things like LEED certification for the environment. Well certification focuses on human health and human well-being. And that has been a program that's been adopted pretty prominently throughout the world since 2015 in over 63 countries now, upwards of about 600 or 700 million square feet of real estate assets, including hotels and stadiums, libraries, offices, schools, public facilities. And it was very interesting to see the marketplace run these things side by side, because our biggest focus was to make sure that anything that is being done to intervene from a human wellness and biological sustainability perspective did in no way conflict or disrupt any progress on the environmental side. So energy compensation and energy usage is a very, very big factor as we consider the right interventions from a medical perspective.
Oh, that's a great thing, Peter. Work environment creates a lot of stresses. Is your certification that people do certain things to reduce the stress, maybe not have as much workload?
Yes, well, I wouldn't say not as much workload because productivity is a key factor, but I think it's about developing the indoor environment that can promote lower stress. There are so many things that contribute to stress. Workload is certainly one of them, and work-life balance is important. But if you think about the other elements in indoor environmental factors that contribute to the body's stress levels, including ambient sound and things we can do acoustically in our working environment to lower the ambient sound levels around us, because that's a key driver of stress indicators. And there are many more, of course, but those are some of the things we're looking at.
Oh, well, Peter, congratulations. If I remember correctly, you just have gone through the certification at Yankee Stadium, which I'm sure was a monumental task. What all went into a building of that size with so many moving parts? I know this is not directly related to hotels, but I'm fascinated that a building of that magnitude went through the certification.
Excellent. Thank you. At the outset of the COVID pandemic, industry groups and property owners of all types, including hotels, approached us and said, okay, you as the International Well Building Institute, you've been certifying real estate for health and wellness attributes for over 6 years, all across the globe. And the categories, that encompass some of the things that I described to you before are very broad. The industry asked us for a specific designation related to pathogen transmission, the risks of virus being spread indoors. And so what we did was we took the body of work, we assembled a task force led by Surgeon General Richard Carmona, the 17th Surgeon General of the U.S., and ultimately it was over 600 doctors, virologists, and building experts having dialogue to make sure that the designation called the Well Health Safety Rating, a subset of well certification as a family of programs, could examine the way these spaces are operated. So the Well Health Safety Rating does not involve things that are architectural upgrades or physical improvements to the space. That's a broader focus, pointed to by the Well Certification Program. The Health Safety Rating looks at the way these facilities are operated and run. In the category of health safety, of course, it's emergency response plan, cleaning practices, operational maintenance and protocols, employee policy related to communication and sick leave and testing and things like that, which resonated with the industry. And we've gotten some wonderful adoption across the board. Hotel owners, hotel operators, hotel flags, libraries, as I mentioned, big stadiums. Many of the sports leagues followed. The Yankee Stadium was the first to come out of the program and achieve the rating. But it really focuses on the policies, right? So that can be done whether a structure is very small or very big. It's really not dependent on square footage, because we're talking about, in the case of the health safety rating, how these facilities are operated. What are the policies and protocols and procedures that are put in place? And that can be similar for large and small.
Fair enough. Let's talk about the industry that is near and dear to our heart and our platform and our viewers, which is hospitality and hotels. Talk a little bit about how these concepts and principles have been applied to the hotel industry.
Excellent. So there's a delineation between the things like the health safety rating, looking at practices and protocols, and then, of course, looking at the broader category of human sustainability. There are things that can be done with in-room product solutions and technologies, such as wall-mounted air purification units. Of course, we run a lot of tests here at Delos to examine the efficacy, filtration rate of these things, and also make sure that there is no harmful byproducts. There's a lot of air filter technologies and solutions that, because of the mechanism of action, they produce harmful byproducts like ozone. So air filtration in the room is key. Of course, you want mattresses that don't off-gas, and that can be done, but a lot of these memory foam mattresses are filled with things that are not good for the human body and not good for the environment at all. And so focusing on natural, non-off-gassing material in that regard. Lighting, that can have a profound impact on your sleeping patterns, your susceptibility to things like jet lag. The body is, and it's just about 12 years ago that doctors discovered that our eyes are vehicles not just for seeing, but also vehicles for telling the body what time of day it is. And so, as you all know, we've been walking around since the onset of electricity and indoor lighting as if it's a constant twilight, right? We get way too much light late at night, artificial light indoors that's telling our body and tricking our body into thinking it's 11 a.m. and that we should have high levels of cortisol and we should be suppressing our melatonin. That is the worst thing you can do to your body as you prepare for sleep. Looking at TV screens and iPhones and lights indoors that do not properly adjust to tell the body, no, it's not late morning. You should actually be preparing for rest. So the circadian cycle and circadian lighting is a big element of the program. And that can have some wonderful effects on the body to kind of reverse what we've been doing. We built these boxes around ourselves, and that's not the way the human condition was supposed to operate. And so what we can do indoors to help reverse that, air quality, water quality, lighting, sound levels, all of those things combined have a very good effect.
Well, thank you for that, Peter. And I'm going to turn it over to Sam here in a little bit. But before I do, your Stay Well program that is focused on hotels and hospitality, are some of these components that you talked about, some or all of them, are part of that program?
Yes, they certainly are. The full program has a number of different levels as it relates to how much of the wellness narrative hotel operators and owners want to pass along down to guests. And of course, there's economic considerations there, but the elements I described, including many more, content that promotes immune health, content that improves nutrition habits, and then of course the physical things in the room that I described are all part of that program.
I'm not sure if it's a more recent phenomenon or we're just hearing more about it, but quite candidly, sleep deprivation or not being able to sleep is very commonly talked about. Now, there could be multitudes of reasons for that, but especially when you go into the hotels, it is a different environment. It's a new environment, a foreign environment, plus the room itself. If it's not comfortable, you might not be able to sleep. So I'm sure the elements that you introduce into a hotel room that could work very well, particularly for hotels that operate next to massive airports where people are the true road warriors come and stay.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. There's so many things that affect your sleep quality. Of course, sound, and of course the instruments that we're sleeping on, right? But equally, the kind of light that entered your body that day, and the kind of light you're exposed to just before sleep. Even how you wake up. We should be waking up to gradually increasing light, not an alarm clock that shocks the body before the mind is even awake. So yeah, it's interesting stuff. It's great science, and we enjoyed sharing with you today.
Superb. Peter, let me turn it over to Sam, and I'll be back with you in a moment.
Wonderful.
Well, Peter, this is very interesting things that you're talking about. I know I already have some viewers who are commenting, but I would like to just initially get a feel of the value that your programs are giving hotels and particularly hotel guests. What are when you're pitching your program for the hotels, because there's a cost factor to it, what are the things that are you saying that this is going to be the reason you should buy into this program?
Excellent. Look, at the end of the day, economics do drive decision making. And so we have to make sure that the end consumer gets a good experience. And if the end consumer is saying that I feel different when I wake up in a Stay Well room, that I've gotten a better quality sleep, more rest, I'm more productive in the day, my nutritional habits while on the road, and it's so important, right, have improved. Those are the things that actually drive people to seek those types of environments and in fact pay more than they would for an environment that doesn't have them, right? And so ultimately that does translate into an ROI and demand drivers, and most importantly, loyalty, right? We've had countless examples of of guests that have stayed in Stay-Well rooms. And then from that point on, they do not want to stay in a standard room. And so identical Stay-Well versus standard rooms on the same property, the Stay-Well rooms are more in demand and commanding higher rates. And of course, that's where it gets into the economics and the ROI for the hotel owner.
Yeah, excellent. Now, are there some listings? For instance, someone was asking me, where can I find the properties that has been certified in your program? Is there a listing available? How does it work in practicality?
Yeah, sure. So there's two places to look. One is wellcertified.com, and that would encompass well certification and the health safety rating. That is not the Stay-Well program. That's an entirely different part of the organization. But the Delos website has information on our hospitality programming, and on there we do showcase and illuminate the properties that are employing Stay-Well as a program. So either one of those places would have different pieces of information, whether or not you're looking for info on hotels that have been certified or rated according to the well building standard and the health safety rating, or for the Stay-Well experience at Delos, there's a list of properties that have them as well.
Very good. Now, I remember when I had this discussion when I was in development for the hotel brand, where we always pitch in that what is the reason this particular company should put our branded flag on the roof. Well, we said that, it will give you, one of these days, if you are selling your property, it will give you maybe a 20% or 50% added value, which you can sell your property for. What added value will your programs or certifications or what you are doing will add to the property if the owner one day says, I want to sell off my assets?
Yeah, no, excellent. Economically, if you're improving the ADR rate across the property and increasing occupancy rates as it relates to demand, then of course that can better position the asset for a sale. Separately, it depends on the audience, right? For some of the certification programs in corporate environment, it's about driving client employee productivity, right? It's also about retention of your workers to be in a healthy environment. So for hotels, I think it's increased asset value, increased cash flows and ADR. For many other typologies, it certainly is, okay, this is what we're doing for our employees and for our staff. And that does apply across the board. Very
good. Yeah, I think that's, you're onto something very, very interesting. And I think that's the time has changed in what the demands of the consumer is, and they will be looking for those things. And I have noticed also there's one particular hotel chain who I think is Equinox, who are talking about sleep, the quality of sleep in the room and so on. So that's really something which is really interesting, at least particularly what you are doing. And I think the demand, I'm sure, will be increasing that. But what happens to hotels that's been built 30 years ago, and how are they able to join of that good things that you are doing?
Well, thankfully, the Stay-Well program was actually designed for existing hotels, not just the shiny new construction, because most of these things can be done in less than one day for a full floor of rooms at a hotel. And that's exciting, right? Because you've got an existing asset that's occupied. They're not going to shut down for a renovation easily. This does not require a renovation. Wall-mounted air purification, circadian lighting that can be plugged into the existing lighting fixtures so that there's no breaking sheetrock, water filtration at point of use instead of building wide. We did take a very hard look at the fact that the marketplace needs things for existing facilities, not just new construction.
Very good. Okay, I will going to bring Abid back into the discussion. So thanks very much for all those answers, and over to you, Abid.
Thank you, Sam. Peter, talk a little bit about technology. How has that helped get the certification done and manage the buildings more sustainably?
Excellent. Look, I think lighting's probably a good place to focus there, because the lighting industry has moved, towards LED full spectrum lighting. And with LED lighting at full spectrum, you can actually mimic the color, temperature, lux, and hue of the sun outside, but you can do that indoors. So you can bring the natural elements of what our body is looking for as it relates to, light, time, regulation, and do that indoors. Thankfully, that does speak favorably to energy usage, because the technology improvements on light, of course, use less energy. And the cost implications are there as well as it relates to duration over time. So that's something that goes hand in hand with the environmental movement, and technology and lighting has allowed us to replicate outdoor sun patterns, but bring that indoors. It's very, very important. Equally, of course, digital technology and communication, application software that we can access these things on our phone, perhaps control the room from our phone in our homes in many cases as well, is very important to be able to really express all of the scientific principles that our organization rests on, and use a white canvas really to say, okay, technology can help us do that indoors, as opposed to, again, being victims to the fact that we spend 90% of our time indoors, right? And that's not what our bodies were meant to do. So we have to do our best to bring the outdoor and the natural elements inside.
Terrific. Has your focus evolved or changed in any way as we are operating in this pandemic? Are you getting different requests?
Yeah, we've focused a lot on air quality. I mean, we've been looking at ultrafine particles for many, many years. I think up until the outset of the pandemic, the focus was on environmental pollution and respiratory disease as it relates to long-term exposure to PM 2.5 levels that are too high and things like that. There's been a profound shift, obviously, in the world's understanding of the potential for viral transmission if ventilation rates are not high enough indoors. And there's filtration technology that can capture particle sizes that are even smaller than COVID and things like that. So the pathogen concern has increased the focus on air quality for sure. I think beyond just environmental concerns and long-term considerations to, acute risk of pathogen transmission inside. So that's been a very, very big focus. As a matter of fact, we just recently have worked with the New York City public school system, and we'll be delivering 10,000 air solutions for the New York City public schools before school opens. So that's been a very important category.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's fabulous. Peter, one last question before I bring in our next guest. Any of these principles that we can use at our homes, at our houses, because a lot of people now are spending time at home. All of us are working from home. Is there any of these things that we can easily implement at our homes?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, every single category you can. Whether it's the mattress you're sleeping on, the air quality in your home, whether it's circadian lighting. I mean, all of these things are available and can be brought to the home. As a matter of fact, many guests that stay in stay-well rooms say, wow, I just had the best experience. Let me purchase some of these things, or look to examine solutions in the marketplace that could be appropriate for the in-house setting. Whatever can be done in a hotel room can be done in a house. So quite simply, everything translates.
Oh, terrific. Well, Peter, please do stay with us. We'll have you back in a little bit, but at this particular point, I'd like to introduce our next guest, Laura Ferrand. She's a sustainability and energy consultant with Longevity Partners. Laura, welcome to Hospitality Talks.
Hi, Abid. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, thanks for taking the time, Laura. This is, as we've been talking about, this is a very appropriate conversation, a conversation that has been had for a very long time, but with this pandemic, it has become more front and center on everybody's radar. So we really appreciate you taking the time and help us better understand. Talk a little bit about the importance of sustainable practices, if you would, particularly during planning, design, and construction phases. How does that enhance the asset value? How does that impact the health and safety issues?
Yes, absolutely. So when undergoing large scale or just renovations, that is tying in with the WELL certification that Peter just talked about. There are green certifications for the likes of BREEAM and LEED being the main ones worldwide. These green certification are excellent certification to bring a frame to sustainability when undergoing refurbishment or new construction. even if some organizations don't choose to actually undergo the actual certification process, it might be of a time or a budget constraint, there's still a lot of good practices that we can pick up from those certification and have very practical examples of targets and KPIs that we can take and embed into any one corporation's standard processes to perform better on sustainability topics. And I think Sam mentioned asset value. That is totally right. I think from an asset owner perspective, green certification has been actually quantified to bring in a bonus in terms of asset valuation on the market. But I think for operators as well of hotels, hotel chains or franchises, it is as well a twofold benefit, because there is everything that is linked to communication and the fact that we wouldn't be surprised, I think, in the coming years to see clients making choices of accommodation based on sustainability performance of hotels. But as well, from an internal point of view, it is very interesting to being able to lower your operating costs, and that comes with lowering your energy expenses and water bills as well.
Those are excellent points. I'm sure you are aware of it, that during construction phases and design phases, all these topics come up. But when the actual program starts to solidify, unfortunately, because of budgetary constraints or different focuses, a lot of these things don't make it to the final stages. Tell us some success stories that you've been able to convince the developers that these things really do matter, and in the long run, they would be beneficial to the asset.
Absolutely. I think it's a very valid point, because we do end up sometimes in situations where it's been too late, design choices have been made, procurement has started, we would have to redesign the entire process, and we are under time constraint when we need to close an asset for deep refurbishment. So I think it's, first of all, a very valid point to say that sustainability needs to be embedded from the very early stages when we are considering a project and still briefing about the requirements. That's where a lot of studies can be made up front and inform thereafter the design process, so that we can make smart decisions. That is exactly the case for example, passive design analysis, informing how we can make use of more natural daylight, natural ventilation by changing the asset, the build of the asset. Not only that can come sometimes with cost savings, upfront cost savings, so cheaper solutions, but also one of a study that is really good to make is a life cycle analysis, saying how on a 20-year run the cumulated cost of operating the building, and that's where we can see really tremendous savings. And bringing in energy experts from the very beginning as well can prove to show a lot of savings by moving away from just replacing like for like, building services like for example, but trying to engineer and redesign a ventilation system, redesign a heating and cooling system, so that we embed passive design, low energy technologies, then we end up with truly beneficial solutions.
So, thank you for that. Most of the time when these projects are being costed out, people typically go through the NPV calculations and the money that I'm going to spend today versus the money that I would save. The money that I spent today is more valuable. So a lot of these things go by the wayside. But more importantly, when we are renovating the existing buildings, and some of these buildings are functionally obsolete at this point, but yet we continue to renovate them and give them another life cycle. How have these practices been implemented? What are some of the things that have been successful in existing buildings?
I'd say in existing buildings, yes, there are two things. There are things we can do, like Peter said, without disrupting the operation of the building. So we can do as we go, and then there's deep refurbishment where we actually need to replace major plant. I think if we start with the major plant replacement, this would be redesigning and rethinking the use of the building, really quantifying the requirements and how we can design a building services system that is not oversized, that is fit for purpose, and that is used and controlled in tune with the operation of the building. This is probably the most important thing to remember. And then in terms of technologies and good practices that we can implement without disrupting the building, we have LED lighting upgrade. This can be done out of hours or within a couple of hours, just closing rooms for half a day or a day. And we have everything that is linked to energy metering and monitoring, because very important is that we cannot manage what we cannot measure and quantify. So this is where it starts, understanding, especially for chains and portfolios of several assets, being able to benchmark the consumption of your assets on maybe amounts of energy per room or per nights or per floors or per square meters. This is where it becomes very interesting, being able to pinpoint which assets are consuming more and why. Is it because the build itself of the asset is consuming more? Do we need to do more in isolating the building, thermal insulation of the building? And otherwise, is it because it's not being operated properly? And can we do more with the likes of BMS controls and in general operation of the building by the facilities staff?
Okay. You know, I was just reading an article that one of the hotels, as a matter of fact, one of the old heritage hotels in Canada has become carbon neutral, and there were some great practices they had listed in it. Can you tell us some of the basic things we can do to help reduce our footprint? And I will turn it over to Sam here in a little bit, but if you don't mind helping our viewers understand some of the simple things that we can do to get to a neutrality point.
Yes, absolutely. I think the neutrality point is always start with wasted energy. So wasted energy is where you do not operate your building in an efficient way, and you are wasting, for example, your heating and cooling your building at the same time, or you let unoccupied rooms being heated and cooled. Or your ventilation system is running constantly, disregarding the actual occupancy of the building. These are extremely wasteful operations, and they can be very rapidly identified and remediated. Then when we identify this waste, the second is to install energy efficient technologies. We mentioned LED lighting. This can be high efficiency boilers, high efficiency adiabatic cooling, variable drive. There is a lot of technology in terms of the building services and ventilation of the building. And third, whatever we cannot save from waste, whatever we cannot produce efficiently, that base is about producing green and offsetting, and that's where renewable technologies come in line. And for assets that benefit from a good location and roof space, solar PV, for example, is the perfect business case.
Terrific. Well, let me turn it over to Sam, and I'll be right back with you. Sam, over to you.
Thank you. Very interesting points that you are making. We are living in part of a sort of the environment of COVID-19. For some, it's maybe after already, but some is still living in the middle of it. So I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are about what are the most talked about issues when it relates to COVID and the building and renovations and design at the moment. What are you hearing?
Yes, I think COVID in general brought more attention to sustainability as a whole. So everything that is linked to sourcing responsibly, making the right choices in terms of energy conservation and carbon footprint, embodied carbon as well, of all the furniture and the building services that we choose, that has made a massive impact. The focus is there now. more than before. But then a concern that we see growing in the energy conservation industry is about air quality. The recommendation is obviously to make sure that the fresh air volumes are as high as possible and buildings properly ventilated. That means that we cannot recirculate the air in a building, and this means that this is a very wasteful way of operating a building in terms of energy. So that means that now more than ever, we must consider heat recovery, for example, in ventilation systems.
I used to, my first hotels I operated or managed was in the 80s, and every single room had their own split air conditioning unit, and we were just cursing at, oh, this is really so wasteful. But now things are, we're in COVID, now people say, well, that's great, we should have all, we still go back to the split air conditioning units, because at least it's we're not circulating in air that we might get affected. What do you think about that?
Yes, there's two types. Some conditioning unit, they only really just deliver the cooling, and the ventilation is actually centralized. But it's very true, though, that there is a tendency to a trend to put health and safety first and then energy second. But I think there's many technologies. Yes, there is filtration, there is UV, and there is heat recovery. We can actually have the best of the two worlds if we design our buildings properly and we inform the design process early on to make the right decisions in procurement.
Yeah, very good. Now, I saw that some hotels had been coming up with ideas that there's a way that the hotel guests themselves can be part of the solution during their stay, how much water they're using and the water consumption. In fact, they're putting some meters and so on. And if they are reaching a certain level of savings, that also is translated maybe saving in their cost of their stay. Your thoughts on this approach to saving and energy consumption?
Yeah, I think it's very important, because that just translates the trend that is where certain client will get to choose their accommodation based on these new choosing factors. So whether they're asked to actually play an active role, or they just like to know that by choosing such accommodation, they will not increase their carbon footprint, that will be very important factors. And then going to the kind of the deep end of measuring everything, they become very smart and techie buildings. It's one way to go, and it can be very engaging. And I think they are very good pilot buildings to then inform the wider industry as well.
Yeah, because I think that, for instance, for our family are traveling, it's almost like a good discussion point on how much did we help. And children are very outspoken, like, in the neighboring country, Sweden, Greta is one of the good examples. She's very outspoken with her generation about saving the planet. So I think maybe there's a thought on there. Very good. Well, thank you very much, Laura. This was very interesting, and I will bring Abid back to the discussion. And over to you, Abid.
Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about the construction. I know construction materials can be one of the huge pollutants for the environment, particularly the residual impact of construction, whether it's renovation or new build. Talk a little bit about that. What are some of the principles behind responsible, sustainable construction?
Yes, well, in terms of hospitality, a lot of the design attention and construction and waste goes into the actual fit out. And so when undergoing a refurbishment, a very good exercise is to do a preliminary study of which materials of furniture can be reclaimed, reused, or recycled on the very site without having to also put in kilometers of transportation. And this is important because this needs to be done upstream in your design process to then inform your interior design and inform your procurement process. And otherwise, in terms of the non-avoidable waste in the construction process. It's also part and embedded in the green certification, the management of the construction site itself, and how we choose, for example, a constructor that is embedding those responsible construction management of waste, of water, of electricity on site, but also governance for the people they are working on the site, and nuisance that we can bring to neighborhoods.
Terrific, Lo. Thank you for all that information. I think it's a great segue to bring our next guest in at this particular point, who has done a lot of work on design side. Please do stay with us. We will have you back in a bit. But let me bring our next guest, Yasmine Mahmoudieh. Yasmine is founder and CEO of her own organization and has done some fabulous work on the design side of it, not only very aesthetically pleasing, but also sustainable design. So we look forward to hearing from Yasmine. Yasmine, welcome to Hospitality Talks.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you.
Well, thanks for joining us. Talk a little bit about the sustainable design movement. How did it begin? Give us a bit of a background. What brought it together?
Well, I think it depends on any practice. We have been looking with my company into it for decades, because I always thought that, as architects and designers, we have a large responsibility of carbon footprints and, what we leave on future generations. So I have had a passion to research materials across the globe that are, besides their, the physical quality and maybe the aesthetics, to have also other qualities which are not contributing to the carbon footprint, and also in terms of construction methodology. Obviously with the climate change and, in the last decade and especially the last years, and all kind of movements going around the world, from, Extinction Rebellion in London, where everybody has seen, how a city could be paused. There is more awareness now than ever. And I think that, unfortunately, if there wasn't enough pressure for the industry and also for the hospitality industry to disregard it to a certain extent. And unfortunately, as so often in life, when it gets really tight and things go worse, and you can see also that there's a request, specifically also in the hospitality sector, for demand for more responsible buildings. I think that's where it has kind of started off in a much more a broader sense, but in terms of myself, it was always there already before.
So Yasmine, talk a little bit about your personal design philosophy. What components, what thought processes do you take into account when you're working on a project?
Well, I think my personal philosophy is we work very global. We always try to understand the location and the heritage of a place, and combine that with something that is a bit futuristic, that is going to last more than a few years. Because I think even design that will last longer, it doesn't have to be exchanged, updated in very often, like in few years, 5 years, 6 years. It's already a success for that. So I do believe that it's for me it's being very kind of like very sensitive with the environment that you're working. If it's a city hotel, if it's a resort hotel, whatever you do, and really understanding also the target client, what you can create, how you can enhance life. I mean, we have been looking in the last years to, for an experience society, and saying, it's the experience. And I think it's no more than experience, it's impact. What can you learn from traveling? What can you take back home? For me, it's design has to be a combination of ingenious innovation. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done this field. I would have gone into a different profession. But respecting something of the past and creating something that is functional, sustainable, and is also bring good returns of investments for our owners and clients. So it's not one-off. It's a whole combination of factors that you have to aim to succeed and have very high goals to achieve this.
I have an absolute world of respect for designers, because you guys do amazing things in creating most beautiful spaces. So I've always said, unfortunately, if I was ever to design a hotel, it'll probably turn out to be a jail. So hats off to you guys, because you guys do an incredible job. Now, I know that you have launched a branded product, Canopia, that takes into account some of the biophilic design elements, and it's sustainable. Help us understand what that product is about and what that concept is about. And I will be turning it over to Sam here in a little bit, but before we do, if you wouldn't mind helping us understand about that concept.
Yes, well, the concept is not mine. It's of some French Vietnamese architecture company in Vietnam. I happened to give a lecture at the hospitality conference in Vietnam last year, and we kind of met during this conference, and we saw that we have the same ideas about sustainability, and they were working on this kind of glamping concept. We were working on something on 3 hotels, 3 cabins, lodges, from the UK. And they had developed already a concept that is like a pre-manufactured, ecological, very sustainable project. So I kind of joined in and partnered with them because I found this as a genius idea, very similar to what we were starting to study, but they had the final product. And so the idea is it's like lodges, it's luxury lodges that you can, that you can just order, because it's a prefabricated kind of a concept which is installed in 4 to 6 months from the day you order it, which has 1/4 of the consumption of normal, hotel rooms, and which is totally, every material is sustainable. It has all the, energy requirements to be much less consuming than any other, kind of hotel room. Low maintenance. It's against seismic, situations and typhoon. It's for the tropical climate at the moment. So I joined in to help, first of all, extend the shell to the interiors and come up with much more innovative materials in the interior design for it. And then also, as we also going to do, obviously, the main areas, reception, lobby, and all that spaces, how can we extend that? But that will be bespoke. So they have kind of developed this concept that you can just kind of off-the-shelf order. And that's really interesting for luxury and also, lifestyle, mid-market hotel developers, because you can build it very quickly. It can be removed and put into another location, so it's dismountable. And so that kind of brought us together, and we are expanding this, and we are also trying to adjust this for desert climate, for Mediterranean use. And it comes together with what we have been doing for a very long time to look into 3 hotels, cabins, and we're working on some new ideas for Vision 2030 in Saudi Arabia. So it's really about seeing what is there that you can enhance, and how you can come up with products that are going to be, especially also now during COVID, really requested, because they have a privacy factor, and it's all about natural ventilation, and all the materials are 100% totally sustainable.
Yeah. I think it's a terrific idea, quite candidly, because some of the remote locations where construction can take a life of its own, this is calculated risk, because it's prefabricated, it's just assembled on site. So destinations like Maldives or a lot of the other remote destinations, that concept could work extremely well. Yasmine, let me turn it over to Sam, and I'll be back with you in a moment. Sam, over to you.
I'm interested to learn more about what's inside the room or in the hotel about sustainable materials. What are your thoughts? What are the kind of materials that you are thinking of using in your designs these days? What are your thoughts on? Maybe you can just share with the viewers about your maybe philosophy on sustainable materials for the hotels.
Absolutely. We have, I think, one of the probably best selected libraries, I would claim, for sustainable materials, from using like the skin of the green apple for fabrics, for furniture. We are using a lot of reclaimed wood. We are using, for example, looking also in desert situations, we have found a material which you can create from desert sand, which is more sturdy than concrete. It's a special process, and it's taking half of the carbon footprint. And especially in locations like Saudi Arabia, where you have lots of abundance of sand. It can be very interesting. We have looked into materials which are an organic brick with organic waste from the fungus, and it becomes a very interesting building material, which is very strong, which you can mold, which is really also aesthetically amazing, interesting. We have been commissioned to make a proposal for a facade of a hotel project in Athens, where we used a material called iMesh, which is from carbon fiber and basalt, and it actually takes a lot of the heat in southern countries, consumes it. You need less air conditioning inside the hotel, and also we included a lighting diode, so it's gleaming at night from the outside facade. So all these materials that we are using have also really, I mean, as an, coming from an aesthetic profession, for me they cannot be only making sense logically and ticking all the boxes. They have to be attractive, because at the end of the day, we're all visual and we want to enter into places that attune to our senses. But I think that's, these are so few examples of, we have so many, other materials that are from leftover plastic bottles, from the tops of glass bottles, which are created as new glass tiles. So there's almost no difference in having, materials that are absolutely sustainable. And there's so many, from rhubarb, we have materials that are sustainable. So there's like an enormous amount. I mean, I could go on for hours and explain you, but we like to introduce them and into design, because I also think that you have to bring differentiation for each project and create a certain memory for hotel guests to be in a hotel, that this will not, that this is not becoming boring, and I've seen it before over and over again.
Fantastic. Yeah, I can hear you are very passionate about this topic, so I'm sure there will be more you'll love to share with us. But I'd like to just to address the situation on changes in design consideration during the COVID, all the antibacterial surfaces. What kind of surface are you favoring and using in your design, because of people being cautious about this COVID-19?
We did a lot of research during the whole pandemic, and I don't know if you've seen, but I've written a few articles on LinkedIn, and we have found really looking over the whole globe, and we have found a very interesting company where they have created a certain code which is staying for 12 months, covering all the surfaces, and especially in the combination with lighting, it can, combat the virus for 12 months. Now they're waiting for the last certification, to be 100% approved by all the testing in the UK and Europe and also in America. But this is something really very exciting. We are also working directly with far UVC lighting. I don't know if you have read about it, but Columbia University was the first one to come up that far UVC lighting is, was killing already SARS, and now they are also waiting to get approval for COVID. So we are working actually on a lighting collection with using far UVC light in a combination with this coating. And the most important is, and I can just, add to what Peter was saying and somebody else, that we all have to be very careful, because most products today to sanitize hotels are toxic. So, we might kill the virus, but we might get cancer and have all toxins in our body. So this one company we are talking to at the moment, it's totally non-toxic and is going to seal the surfaces. So this is where I'm really also digging deep into to see that there is no toxicity involved. And this is, by the way, another parameter for my practice, that every material we have a certain way to check it if there are toxins in it. And so we are really, I totally believe what Peter was saying, that the toxicity and the sustainability for human beings is as important. And, we come from nature, and we have to protect our life, and we have to protect nature. It's the same thing.
Absolutely. Excellent. Now, everything you're saying, I'm in total agreement with. So I'm just looking around my home. What are the things I can apply to my home in home living that falls into all this, what you're talking about? How could we apply it?
Well, I think, and I hopefully can get news out of these products these companies that we're working with, because this could be taken, also these surface treatments can be taken to anybody's home. We are also working with fabrics that are purifying the air. We are working on a new fabric collection with a really interesting material that was invented for this. We are working since some time with a Swiss company who created a yarn for electrosmog, talking about, also electrosmoke, and we talked before, Peter talked about the sleep pattern and how the circadian rhythm is disrupted by electronics, by all our electronics. We are working with these materials that shield 98% of electrosmog. You can use the same at your home. So everything that you can imagine to be existing in a hotel room, you can transfer that and take it into your home. And we have materials that are, we designed a concept for children in hotels with sustainable furniture, and also an educational concept called My Kidsie. We were using floors that purify the air, are antibacterial and anti-odor, and these materials exist. I find it, a bit sad that not many people research it and find it, because they're existing already. And I think if more architects and designers would use it, we would see a lot of improvement of health, during the stay in hotels or in any other building, including residential homes.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Now I will turn over to Abid for any final questions with you before we all get together to discuss some final questions today.
Thank you, Sam. And one more question for Yasmine. Yasmine, do you see any design changes as a result of the pandemic that we are dealing with? Hospitality generally is a very high-touch environment to welcome people, to welcome guests. The designs are very intricate designs. What changes do you see when we come out of it on the other side?
Well, I think, we have, there's a lot of talk about touchless points. So having apps that can do a lot of things for you, including from ordering room service to, to bring you whatever you want to your room, from opening doors, which has sensor technology. But again, I think it's really depends on the level of the hotel. You can see, I've been traveling during the summer in Europe, and I had the most amazing different experiences from some hotels who don't care at all. Like you almost think there's no difference. Tons of decoration and books in the room where you wonder this is not taken out. So you could see a difference in countries. Germany is much more careful than UK. Greece was extremely careful on everything, with taking your temperature, going in a place. You can see that the measures are very different according to the countries, and I guess the people represent the country. But I think what is changing is that, of course, you have more distance at the moment. We were discussing what is the short-term change and what will endure, after the pandemic is over, just to be better prepared. And I think the fact that, the hygiene is very important, but again, using natural treatments that are not harmful for human beings, and that is very hard to find. There you really have to dig very deep to find it. And having don't have too many touch points. This is where I see there's a lot of interest in in hotels and restaurants to feel it. Also the well-being of feeling safe in a space, and I think this is what hotels have to think about. And
right.
Yeah, I think
Terrific. Sam, if it's okay, let's bring everybody together. But Yasmine, one of the points that you brought up, that even in your own travels, you have seen differences in different markets. Quite candidly, that is unfortunately a challenge in tourism industry because everybody is doing different things. So the consumer doesn't know what to expect. So as somebody visiting US, each of the states are doing different things. When somebody goes and visits Europe, each of the countries are doing different things. Peter, maybe a question for you, if I may ask you, how can the travel and tourism industry put a cohesive standard so that the consumer will get some confidence that, yes, they are going to be looked after and they are going to be taken care of?
That's an excellent question. I think that, the consumer awareness, ultimately, that's the end user of everything, right? So whether it's a direct purchase or it's a choice of which buildings to enter versus which buildings not to, a consumer understanding that things have been verified by third party, I think, is where it's very critical. In times of crisis, innovation is at its highest. We've seen some great innovations in technology and the use of QR codes and our phones and our apps for things. That's wonderful. But in times of crisis, you also run the risk that there's a lot of solutions, technologies, and claims being made in the marketplace that aren't validated by testing and certainly aren't validated by third parties. So separating the fact from the fiction with the element of the trust is the most important thing we think there is right now in this period of time. We've focused on providing ways to be a centralized source for third-party verification of things that are unbiased, without a stake in the game or a bias towards one product solution or another. That being said, I think the travel and tourist industry can rely on things like the Well Health Safety Rating, for example, as okay, this is not a hotel industry group that is making a claim. It's not a hotel owner making a claim that they've done X, Y, or Z. It's a centralized certifying body that has taken an unbiased view and a third-party review of these intentions, and then making sure that that's something that the consumer knows, like they do the Good Housekeeping seal, if you will, right? So that's and it's very fragmented right now. So it's important to aggregate the best of and then try to work towards one pathway.
I think that is a very good point, quite candidly. Somebody that is in an arm's length and doesn't have a sort of a vested interest in that particular facility, consumers will have a better, highest confidence in that, as opposed to me talking about how good my facility is.
Right.
Lo, if I may ask you, from a construction and renovation point of view, how far has the industry progressed? Are we now at a point of using 30% of recycled materials? Is it higher? Is it lower? What would it take to get to a higher level of recycled materials and less pollutants?
Well, I would say there are great disparities in projects. I think the vast majority of projects are still done the usual way, the old way, I'd say. And some projects go to the other end and they try and recycle or get secondhand or, yes, recycled or reused up to 95%. And we see that some of the targets in, for example, the BREEAM scheme is, for example, for construction waste to be recycled or reused up to 95%. So this would be the best, the best practices target. But I think even if it's not just recycling or reusing, there's also responsible sourcing. So if we do have to buy new, let's buy materials and that are with low carbon footprints, that are locally sourced, and that are yes, less polluting and good for the environment of the air quality, for example. So I think it's a complex subject.
It certainly is. It's a very complex subject with lots of little intricate details involved. Yasmine, a question for you, if I may ask. Do the designers typically try to create these impeccable spaces? As an operator, quite candidly, I was always in conversation with designers as to what kind of fabrics would last longer, for example, what kind of wood might be more applicable in commercial environment. Some of the sustainable elements that you talked about, how commercially viable are these materials?
Oh, they are. I mean, some companies are smaller ones, others are bigger ones who come from, chemistry companies even. So I think it is really to do your research. There is a lot of alternatives that you can use. We work with a lot of reclaimed wood, like I said. We also work, which I find extremely important to, like you just were talking about, to source local materials and, have a certain amount of local materials in your project. And also, to me, the sustainability goes even to like local food, local, craftsmanship, and not just have something done in Asia because it's cheaper for a European project, which so many unfortunately do, which we always have refused to work this way. And I think there's, this is the short-term thinking. You have to educate your clients and investors that in the long term, they will be advanced, because this is, for me, a long-term investment and not just making a short, a profit, and maybe something is cheaper to do it now, but then you have to redo it, or it's the wrong thinking. It's about what gives you value, and value is the more important than price. If there's price is an issue when there is no value, from my point of view. So it's also to support the community, and I think this is what we see now, the rise of in luxury also, to have urban communities being integrated, urban culture experiences. I mean, we both talked very quickly about organization I'm joining in with It Must Be Now and and Earthlink, where also there's a brand which connects hotels that are going through these checklists and are going to be accountable, not just talking about sustainability. And on the other side, travelers who come to the site and can book there because they find they are really offering them something special. And I think this is what I see happening.
Terrific. In all those elements, I think would help gain consumer confidence. Laura, back to you, if I may. What's the adoption on renewable energy sources? And I'm going to turn it over to Sam after this, but talk a little bit about, particularly in hospitality industry, how much of energy consumption is now from renewable sources as opposed to fossil fuels? Have we gained any grounds in that area?
Yes, I think the focus is definitely here, and wherever the roof space, for example, for solar justifies it and is not used for leisure, the business case is almost always there now. It is an affordable technology that brings good return on investment. And in terms of producing green energy, it is one of the best technologies that we can do now. Otherwise, there is green procurement, which is encouraging to procure green energy through your grid providers. Other than green energy, there is energy efficiency. So the greenest energy is the one that we don't use. So obviously, this is where it starts at the outset, and then a lot of emphasis on the green energy, as you say.
Terrific. Sam, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Abid. Let's take a little bit of a different approach, because I think we'd like to know a little bit about you and how has COVID affected you. So I would like to ask Peter, Laura, and then Yasmine, what have you learned about yourself during this period of COVID that you didn't maybe consider before so much? Peter.
Excellent question. I've always favored an evidence-based approach in things, and I think that one of the things that comes out of this is, you got to constantly challenge yourself on theories that you think have been embedded, and you follow patterns and you follow habits, and then of course, science tells us new things, and it's difficult to challenge yourself on things that you've been doing for a long period of time. The one thing that makes it easier is when you can support those theories with fact and evidence. So, I think not getting stuck into one pattern, being open to new ideas, listening to the numbers, listening to the science is something that's important, and it kind of reinforced, the belief that, when we make these critical decisions right now, they have to be informed by the right body of work, right body of evidence.
Right. So how about you, Laura? What have you learned about yourself during this COVID period?
I'd say living in large cities, it felt more than ever that we definitely need to do more about wellness and well-being and connection to nature. I think it's been, everybody, I think, will be embedding nature and looking for nature a lot more. And I think we are changing our buying mentality and the way we make decisions when we have to buy something or travel or work or wear somewhere. I think definitely wellness, well-being, and being a responsible human being on this planet.
Yes. Now, just on a personal note, I think it's the first time I really appreciated the spring this year. And I took long walks with my wife, and then we really followed the nature. We are living in what is called, as a cliche, the nature capital of the world. We are surrounded by many parks, and we spend so much time just walking, and we were following how the nature, and I'm an autumn person. I always liked autumn better, but I really fell in love with the spring because I was able to see how the nature is moving from one season to another in a very environment where we have 4 strong seasons. So that's what I learned. How about you, Yasmine? What is your story about? What did you learn about yourself during this COVID period?
Well, I did learn a few things. I think one is that, you can travel less and be as efficient, or actually more efficient in some way, that we don't always have to go to the project sites or to, that things are working That's where digital technology is a help, I think. And then also having these, the moments of, like you said, just to go out when you're in a pandemic and a lockdown and go into a park becomes almost like an amazing experience, which you take for granted when everything is fine. I think appreciating, like you say, the flower, the birds, we have worked with multisensory design, what we are talking, we work with sound and scent artists for a very long time. And I felt like this connection to nature to take that even more, into the projects, which we have already started, because you see how important it is. And I think that's what everybody was longing through, because, there was a lot of bad news every day. And I think you had to get energy of something. And we were also, like Laura saying, quite lucky in most parts of, I think, Europe to have wonderful weather for springtime. So even we were locked down, we could enjoy the natural things and be more focused on it instead of being in deadlines and running around all the time.
That's right. Yeah. Thank you. Abid, how about you? You had something exciting going on during COVID?
Well, quite candidly, even though this is not really COVID related, but as you know, we started this hospitality talks towards the end of last year, but it really caught on with the pandemic. We have had a tremendous following as a result of that, and it is because of our panelists that join us to share their views and share their experiences. I have thoroughly enjoyed this process, and have been able to learn a lot from my home as opposed to having to travel to attend a conference. I think this is a fabulous way to stay connected. And believe it or not, I've spoken to some of the folks that I had lost in touch with for a very long time.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I think we are reaching towards the end of this exciting and very informative episode. So I would like to thank all the live viewers who have joined us on LinkedIn, Facebook Live, and YouTube. And thank you very much for giving us your social currency. We like those hearts and thumbs up and we have seen there a few here, so we are appreciated. But I'd also like to thank all the repeat viewers, because many of you didn't have a chance to watch us live and you're watching it later at your leisure. So all these episodes will be available after we have been live for you to enjoy also. So thank you for my part. Any last words, Abid, you want to share?
Just a huge thanks to Peter, Lo, and Yasmine for joining us. A fabulous conversation. I'm sure our viewers would have learned a lot. And also to echo what you said, Sam, thanks to all of our viewers that have joined us live and our repeat viewers that watch these episodes on our channel. Greatly appreciate your participation. Love to get some feedback from you when you get a chance. Please ask your colleagues and friends to join our platform and get actively involved in it. Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Sam, back to you.
Well, thank you. And I said thank you and you said thank you. So I'll say the final thank you to all the panelists. So I hope you have a good weekend and look forward to keeping in touch for all of you in the future. Thank you.
You as well. Thank you.
Bye.